President Donald Trump is a controversial figure whose wealth is central to his public persona. For decades, Trump has portrayed himself as a self-made billionaire who began with a $1 million loan from his father. Nonetheless, Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, played a much larger role in his son's rise to prominence. We'll look behind Trump's billions in this video to see how he built his real estate empire. Is he, in fact, a self-made billionaire as he claims, or is there more to the story? Donald's fortune originated nearly a century ago with his father's rise. Fred Trump was a true hustler. Fred had to learn how to work after losing his father when he was 12 years old, and the industry he chose was construction. He had built his first residential house by the age of 20, and he got into this business at an excellent time. President Roosevelt had just signed the New Deal, which aimed to encourage residential construction by offering low-interest loans and subsidies, which Fred was eager to take advantage of. As the American homeownership rate increased by 20% in just 3 decades, Fred Trump amassed a fortune, assisted in large part by government grants. The FHA loaned him $26 million in 1949 to build 2 apartment complexes in Brooklyn, Shore Haven and Beach Haven. What's remarkable about him is not that he became wealthy through the use of government funds, which is fairly common, but that he began a massive campaign of funneling money to his children when he was only 40 years old. As an example, when his son Donald was only 3 years old, he set up a contract that provided him with a steady income of $60,000 per year. Donald went to work for his father after graduating from college in 1968, and this is when the wealth transfer truly took off. Donald and his father formed a partnership in 1972 to secure an $8 million loan for the construction of Prospect Tower. Interestingly, despite the fact that Fred did all of the work, Donald received the majority of the profits. By 1975, Donald was earning over $300,000 per year from that building alone, and by the age of 29, he had amassed a fortune from his father. Of course, Fred's goal was not only to enrich Donald, but also to establish an image for him to help launch his career. Donald's net worth was estimated to be $200 million in 1976, despite the fact that the projects he claimed were his actually belonged to his father. Donald was the president of the Trump Organization at the time, which came with a sizable salary, and on top of that, he was constantly receiving loans from Fred. Donald received loans from his father's companies totaling $3 million in 1979, and the way these loans were structured is very interesting. They did come with interest, but it was paid back as soon as the loan was taken out, and because there was no repayment plan, Donald could keep the money indefinitely. These and other loans poured into Donald's bank account as he began his first project in Manhattan, converting the Commodore Hotel into the Grand Hyatt between 1979 and 1980. The same loans would appear a second time between 1980 and 1983, when Donald was building Trump Tower. During this time, Fred devised another plan for his children. He'd buy out the mortgages on at least 14 of his properties and transfer them to trusts, the beneficiaries of which were, of course, Donald and his siblings. Donald effectively became his father's banker during the 1980s, despite the fact that he never actually provided mortgage loans and instead pocketed the interest payments. By the end of the 1980s, all of the distribution methods had transferred nearly $50 million from his father's empire to Donald, but this only encouraged him to take even bigger risks. In 1988, he paid more than $400 million for the Plaza Hotel, and a year later, he paid more than $350 million for Eastern Airlines, which he dubbed Trump Shuttle. The most famous of all is, of course, Donald's entry into the Atlantic City casino business. When Donald's casinos began to fail in the early 1990s, it was Fred who kept them afloat. He gave Donald millions of dollars to keep his casinos from defaulting on their debts before bankruptcy proceedings could be used to restructure them, giving the casinos more time to repay the loans. Fred's personal income increased by an order of magnitude to $50 million, resulting in a $12 million tax bill. To avoid paying this tax around the same time, one of Fred's employees went to the Trump Castle Casino, purchased $3.35 million in casino chips, and then left without betting. Another method Fred used to avoid paying taxes and transferred his wealth to his children was to purchase stakes in Donald's properties and then resell them to him at a loss a few years later. In 1987, he paid more than $15 million for 7.5% of Trump Palace, a 55-story building in Manhattan. Only 4 years later, Fred sold his entire estate for $10,000, claiming that the business was failing when it wasn't. That same year, Trump Palace sold 57 condos for a total of more than $50 million. However, Fred's health began to deteriorate in the early 1990s, and he began to exhibit symptoms of dementia. He began an impressive plan to siphon everything he had left to his children without paying estate taxes before he died, because he still hadn't transferred the majority of his wealth to them. His children formed a maintenance company in 1992, and it quickly became the subcontractor for all of Fred's buildings. All of the millions of dollars spent on repairs and improvements at Fred's properties began to flow through this one company, with a significant markup. The costs of Fred's empire skyrocketed over the next few years. Trash collection services increased by 64%, janitorial supplies increased by 100%, and plumbing increased by 120%. Donald and his siblings took over management of Fred's buildings in 1994, further draining cash from his empire. By 1999, the methods Fred devised were bringing in $2.2 million per year for each of his children. When the time came to transfer the properties themselves, the only thing that mattered was how much the buildings were worth, and to that end, Donald and his siblings hired a well-known real estate appraiser to assist them. Using a variety of techniques, he reduced the price of 25 apartment complexes, totaling 7,000 units, to just $40 million. The most amusing method was how he calculated 2 buildings in Trump Village to have a negative value. You see, in 1992, Fred removed those 2 buildings from an affordable housing program in order to raise rents, but in doing so, he forfeited a tax exemption provided by that program. This resulted in a one-time accounting charge that, if used to calculate the building's value, makes it appear unprofitable, even though it was not. In the end, Fred's entire real estate empire cost him $20 million to transfer. When Fred died in 1999, he had only $2 million in his bank account, and all of the properties he had spent 7 decades accumulating were now in the hands of his children. The irony is that just 5 years later, when Donald's Atlantic City casinos were on the verge of bankruptcy, he persuaded his siblings to sell the entire portfolio. In early 2004, Donald and his siblings sold the empire their father had spent his entire life building to a New York City real estate investor for $700 million, effectively ending Fred Trump's legacy. Of course, Donald has continued to do business since then, and his net worth is now estimated to be around $3 billion, demonstrating that, despite receiving a huge boost from his father, he has accomplished a lot on his own. In terms of the legality of Fred Trump's tax evasion methods, even if they were found to be criminal, the statute of limitations for them has long since passed, so Donald can only be fined. So, what do you think? Does Donald Trump deserve the title of a self-made billionaire? Or is it all a bit exaggerated? Let us know in the comments below. In any case, thank you for your time. We'll talk again next week. In the meantime, feel free to enjoy one of our other videos right here.